Morning, boys and girls. Good to see you. We've got Cam Parker in the building talking about some coaches' contracts expiring here. He's Dalmatian that we might also join the show with us if need be. But look, this is something we're kind of getting through this off season, right? Because we're trying to keep intact the staff as it is. Also the players. Tomorrow the portal comes to a close, so we're kind of watching that, making sure nobody else leaves or goes to the NFL. Again, that all kind of coming down to a close. And then, of course, we've got some contracts expiring, which we're going to talk about. Who are we keeping? If there's, kind of thoughts and opinions about it. But I'll pass it over to you, Cam. How are you? What are you hearing about these contracts expiring? Are you expecting any bumps or bruises coming up?
Well, the big thing is they expire at the end. I'll try to move over here and get in the middle. They move over here, or they expire in the end of January. So if there's going to be any moves, it's going to happen before the end of January. They're going to want to get either the extensions done soon if they want to make any coaching moves. Listen, you're talking about paying a 15-day buyout. That's not a lot of money anyway. So mid-January is where I think you'll see some movement as the playoffs slow down, if they want to get someone from the college ranks, or I think for OC, I still think that the NFL is a possibility. They get someone from up there. Billy's really liked getting guys from the NFL previously. But again, even them getting an OC is still to be determined. I don't know if they're going to make that move, but Billy has had a tendency to hire coaches from the NFL. John Coster came from the NFL. Rob Sale came from the NFL.
Special
Will
teams
Harris
guy
came from the NFL. Joe Houston came from the NFL. So like all these guys that come from the NFL, I think that's where they would kind of look at maybe, even for any other positions too. I think a lot's on the table, because I remember when Will Harris got hired, no one really was expecting that. He doesn't have Florida ties. He doesn't really have Napier ties. And hey, it worked out. He ends up being one of the best assistant coaches this year. So I think that there's a lot on the table that they could work with. But again, the big thing with the OC is you have three essentially offensive coaches whose contract expires. I would think Jabbar Jalouk is a guaranteed extension.
Number one priority. Pay the man.
Yeah, he's Napier's guy. The running backs have been the most consistent room in his 3 years, and recruiting is pretty good with him. But you're essentially looking at the receiver coach and one of the offensive line coaching spots being open. If Florida wants to hire an OC, do they let the OC have a say in if they want to replace Rob Sale or Billy Gonzalez, or do they hire an OC with the understanding that, hey, my coaches are coming back, you don't get to make that decision, you get to work with these guys? There's a lot on the table that they could work with right now.
I think that's what people, and I think most people would say good riddance, with Rob Sale and things like that, because of their feeling about it. But when people are like, oh, just go hire an OC, it's not always as simple as just like hiring a guy and he comes in, he's just like, yeah, I'm here, I'm happy to hang out. It's like, no, I have to. And you kind of saw that last year with Armstrong comes in. Like, hey, I'm not working well with the assistant coaches that were here. I don't know if that was the case, but it seemed like there's definitely some pushback, right, with those guys. So OCs are just inclined to come in to work with, the guys that are already in place. So that could be an interesting one with Billy Gonzalez. I think there's, I kind of saw some different opinions about him. Just you could kind of argue recruiting hasn't been there, right? Hasn't been the best. And you could say, well, hey, Dallas Wilson, Eugene Wilson, Vernell Brown. You could kind of put that to NIL and DJ Lagway being the reason some of those guys are coming. Yeah. Because again, you can the last 2 years, our best wide receivers have been portal guys. Now, I would say his evaluation and development has been great, exceptional in those two categories. Look, for me, again, I think that's a huge factor, is if the OC's okay with it, I'm okay with him. Again, Jalouk being number one. A lot of people give Rob Sale flack. He kind of fits in the category of Billy. Doesn't recruit at an elite level, but we're starting to see the development, I would argue, is there. So it's going to be an interesting one. Now, he's getting paid $1 million. Because he's got the title as co-OC. That, to me, is where the adjustment should happen. And is he willing to take, because there should be a pay cut there, I think, personally.
And that's the other thing, too, where you look at what Armstrong, where he was essentially being paid $1 million to be the defensive coordinator, but he wasn't getting to call plays. It made sense for Florida to kind of cut ties there and let him go do his own thing. Now you open up essentially $1 million in your coaching pool to where, hey, you could go get an offensive coordinator now. Now you kind of have to play the game of, well, if I like this certain candidate, do they want to bring their own guys in? Are they okay with the assistants that I have now? I think the other thing is, will Billy, if he decides to hire an OC, how much is the offense going to change? Is Billy going to want an OC who keeps the same system but calls plays, or is he going to want to revamp the whole thing? I'm more inclined to think that the offense isn't going to change too much. I think that that's where Billy's kind of heading. And again, I don't have the biggest issues with the offensive scheme. It's not terrific, but it's not terrible when DJ Lagway is your quarterback.
Correct.
The play calling has been the issues.
It's when it's being called is what I've been arguing. It's not the plays, it's when they're being called.
Yeah, like the play calls aren't always great, the timing of things, and I think that they could use a twist that an offensive coordinator who gets to just focus on calling plays could bring in, because Billy is, he's running everything, and he's very hands-on when it comes to things like that. Taking play calling off of his plate, I think, would be beneficial for everybody. But it's a tough game that Florida's going to have to play with deciding how, one, do they even want to fill Austin Armstrong's spot with an OC? Two, do you bring back Sale and do you bring back Gonzalez at risk of maybe missing out on an offensive coordinator that wants to bring his own guys in? It's tough. I guarantee they've been thinking about that for a while now, because they're usually not. I know they can make people a little impatient with some of their moves, but they're very methodical with their process to the point that it's painful sometimes. But I guarantee that they've been thinking about this and having these conversations and going over options too, because essentially, even if they bring all those guys back, you have another coaching spot that you have to fill anyways with Armstrong leaving. But I think you make a good point with the Sale thing too, is that you're paying a co-OC and co-offensive line coach $1 million, and he's doesn't get to call plays, and he has an assistant with him,
and he has another a second guy behind him. So he's the third highest paid offensive lineman in the country right now. One being Kyle Flood at Texas, which they're in the playoffs. Number two, Alex Atkins from Florida State, who no longer has a job right now, and Justin Fry, Ohio State, and Jim Michalek from Michigan State. Those who are tied at $1 million. Underneath Rob Sale, Matt Luke at Clemson, LSU, Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma. Those are the guys underneath him, and you could argue, their LSU not so much, but the production from those guys has been much more, I would say, an elite than Rob Sale. And I believe Alex was also calling plays or was part OC at FSU too. So look, I'm not always here to call for people's jobs or whatnot, but I think $1 million, again, especially when you have an assistant, is something to definitely consider and to think about and look into. So that will be interesting to see what happens with Rob Sale. I think people would probably riot if the $1 million were to keep rolling. As for strength and conditioning, Tyler Miles, I know people have their thoughts and opinions on him. I thought coming in kind of late like he did, I was happy with the production. A lot of injuries. I think that was something that a lot of people talked about and discussed and were concerned about. I'm okay with him getting another run at it, though.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, too. He kind of got the short end of the stick with how Craig Fitzgerald left suddenly.
Yeah.
But I think the buy-in from the players immediately where they were going into Billy's office and saying, hey, don't look anywhere else. Here's your replacement. Go get him. And the injury thing, too, a lot of the injuries weren't, I would say, strength and conditioning issues. It was just football injuries. Like, you're going to have injuries when you play this game. They had some just weird ACL issues with a couple guys. Montreal Johnson took an awkward hit. That's not like he was just running and something popped, and it's not because he was strong. He got tackled from behind and got twisted up awkwardly. Even DJ, his injury was because the field in Jacksonville is terrible. Like, he was fine running the entire year until they played in Jacksonville. And so the strength and conditioning I'm not concerned with. I like Tyler Miles. I think the buy-in from the players is great. And you look at, too, the difference between the first 2 years and this year. They were finishing games and competing in the fourth quarter late in the year.
Yeah, that's what I enjoyed it. And I felt like last year we were just getting bullied, and we didn't. That was not a problem this year.
Yeah, and when I look back to the 2023 season, I look at the LSU games where it was a shootout. Fourth quarter, LSU runs away with it.
Yeah.
You look into the Missouri game where Florida was in the driver's seat. Fourth quarter comes around and Missouri is chopping back. You look at the FSU game where they had a 12-0 lead, fourth quarter rolls around, everyone's exhausted. FSU goes and runs away with that one. The difference with this year is you had in the fourth quarter dogfights between LSU and Ole Miss. Florida was the one making the plays down the stretch. And, rough first halves against Tulane and FSU, Florida was the one making big plays in the second half to make it a blowout. It's a lot of that can be attributed to the players. They got the good players in finally. But the strength and conditioning has been a big role too. And I think you see that, especially on the defense, they were a lot more aggressive and just strong this year than they have been previously. So I think if you look at the five that are there, Jaluk is probably the one that's like the heavy favorite. If you were to bet that gets an extension, I think Miles would be up there too. The other three, I don't really know. I think the edge room proved their worth at the end of the year. And Mike Pete also holds the alumni liaison title, but I don't really know what that does. But maybe that's something that Florida likes about him. But the two I'm watching are Rob Sale and Billy Gonzalez. What does Florida do with those two spots, knowing that the outside noise around the program is, are they going to hire an OC? What is this OC going to be allowed to do if they decide to hire one?
If Rob Sale comes back, I think it's gonna stir some stuff up, because I think the Billy Gonzalez one's a little bit different. And I don't feel like, again, I agree with what you're saying that, hey, if somebody comes in, again, Russ Callaway technically has play calling abilities too, so that'll be something to keep an eye on as well. But Rob Sale getting paid $1 million, which I don't think that he's lived up to that hype to the fullest. Again, I think the development has been there. I think the O-line, we're excited going into next year for O-line. You got to give him credit on that, and DeCoster as well. So, but I agree with you. I think that's a big point, that if they are going to go get an OC, these two are huge factors to that. I think, like you said, Jaluk's the right-hand guy. Like, you don't even argue with that. He's proven his worth tenfold. So if an OC be thankful to have Jaluk on their roster. But again, if you're the OC, right, how do you come in and you work with Gonzalez? How do you work with Rob Sale? I've got very limited interaction with both of them. The limited interaction I would have with them, hasn't been the fondest. They're not bro guys, if you know what I'm from. Again, I could be wrong, but they weren't just like the most welcoming guys right off the rip. Now they could be awesome dudes. Obviously the players love them. That's all that really matters. But I don't know if somebody coming in is like, yeah, this ain't for me. So, like you said, I think the idea though, it's that even though they expire, because of the playoffs the playoffs are extending this whole season. I said this on yesterday's show, that there is really no more off season, because this thing's going to go easily into February with the portal and with coaching moves, because of the playoffs going so far as they are. And then that'll be kind of news probably to the middle of February, maybe have a week off. And then we're right into 2026 recruiting cycle, because that's when these guys are visiting last year. Then there's the quiet period, and then it's March, and we're right back into the swing of spring football again. So no time for you, Cam. Okay, just want you to know.
Not at all. I'm already feeling. I took 2 days off for Christmas, and here I am looking at coaching contracts and getting this all together.
Here I am looking at your ass.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. But I think the other thing too is, look, talking about the coaches whose contracts aren't expiring, because that's also a possibility too. I don't think anyone was really expecting Austin Armstrong to be leaving, and he leaves for a better job. Is Florida anticipating someone whose contract is not expiring for them to leave? I know that there's been smoke about.
That's a Ron Roberts pull. See what you did there.
Yeah. We'll see, because there's been smoke and rumors and people talking about him potentially leaving. I don't know if he's going to leave or not. I think he's proven his worth to stay. And maybe even get a pay raise and be just the defensive coordinator, no co's whatsoever. But who knows? Maybe he does want to call it a career and right off into the sunset. But if he, well, just using him as an example, if he leaves, that opens up about $950,000 in your coaching pool.
There's $2 million
according to his contract. Yeah, according to his contract, he's supposed to get a raise for next year. He made about $750 this year. Supposed to get $950 next year. And also shout out to Zach Goodall, by the way, my former boss, our fan of the show, friend of the show, for compiling this last year when all of those guys were hired. So that's what I'm going off of.
Cool.
But yeah, if he decides to leave, or if one of the other defensive assistants, which I don't really know why Will Harris or Gerald Chapman would leave. I think that they found a home and they're well liked at Florida.
Yeah.
But even if Mike Pete, if they decide not to extend his contract, or if Ron Roberts decides to leave, that's another million opened up almost. So that's another thing that you could work with too. But I think the main focus is going to be the wide receivers and the offensive line position because, like you said, the recruiting hasn't been great. There have been people who either really like him or really hate him. Um, we'll see. It should. I think with the contracts expiring mid-January is where everything should kind of. At least we'll know which positions will be open by then.
Yeah, something to keep in mind too is you don't want to make these moves right now either because again the portal technically is still open. Kids can't leave once an assistant coach leaves. Only if Billy leaves, right? They can go into the portal. And again, we kind of heard there was when on his way out, Jack Piper and his pops took some shots at the Peterson scenario. So that I think that's the reason why people are kind of scratching their heads like, is there an issue there, right? If this like there seemed to be a blowing shot on the way out. Like we haven't heard anything else, but we lose two big guys in Searcy and Pyburn. Is it a is there a development issue there? Kind of takes a shot again in his interview talking about I want to be coached by an elite guy. Is that because Napier already kind of made the call like he's not going anywhere? There's just so many things that we're watching and reading into. And again, if a new DC comes in, same thing plays a factor there, right? Like we were just talking about the O line. Like, hey, okay, is the DC going to be okay with the guys that are there too? If Ron Roberts doesn't kind of stay in his role. Because again, people are like, all right, wow, I thought Ron's the DC. Ron's calling the plays. His title isn't defensive coordinator. Yes, he's calling the plays, but he doesn't have the title. From my understanding, I believe you, is he doesn't carry the responsibilities of what a DC should have. He may have taken them on at the end of the year, but he technically, legally doesn't have them.
Yeah, he held his exact title was executive head coach, co-defensive coordinator, and linebackers.
Yep.
So at least when he first got hired, the understanding was he was going to be the linebackers coach. He was going to help Billy with some of the administrative stuff, but he was going to be heavily involved with game planning with Austin Armstrong. But Armstrong would be calling plays, and then before the season, we find out, hey, Ron Roberts is the one who's signaling in plays to the linebackers through the helmet radio. Then as the season goes on, it's just revealed more and more. Ron Roberts is taking control of the defense. He's the one calling plays, and he's still coaching the linebackers. So it's weird. I think if they want to make changes to Ron Roberts' contract too, maybe that could be something where they give him the defensive coordinator title, and then maybe they fill the position by hiring a linebackers coach.
Yeah,
I don't know. But there's a lot that they could work with in the next few weeks over the contracts and filling the spot. The Austin Armstrong move too opens up that extra spot, and you can work with that too, where you don't necessarily have to fill Armstrong's spot with a coordinator. You hire an assistant for $500,000, and then you work around that going forward. There's a lot to work with. Kind of just have to wait and see who gets extended and who doesn't. But yeah, it should be a fun January. Never a dull moment. Never a dull moment. Especially when Alba Verde drops news that could break Gator Nation. There's never a dull moment.
That's the one we're all waiting on. And again, that's big. If it's a big splash hire, which was kind of written about. Hold on, I'm going to ask you. Did you hear anything?
No. Trust me, I was texting around like, "Hey, who is Alba Verde talking about?" And everyone's like, "Dude, I don't know."
Really?
So I don't know. I don't know because I don't know. I even
That's
texted
a lot of
Dave.
I don't know,
Cam.
Like, I feel like you might know something.
I texted Dave like, "Hey, what's going on?" Like, I didn't watch the show, but Dylan's texted me about wanting to write a story. And what'd you guys do? And he's like, "Dude, I don't know, but it's going crazy." And so, listen, it goes back to what I said earlier about as frustrating as it could be with how slow it seems they move with certain decisions. They're very methodical with it. Like I guarantee they've been thinking about this for a while now about how they want to fill certain spots, about whose contracts expiring. But as with everything else that has happened in the Billy Napier era, it's going to be a wait and see kind of thing. But fortunately, we won't have to wait long. We're a month away. I think that they'll start making some moves the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. They won't wait all the way till the end of January.
What is interesting is usually when things like these kind of get started, right? The ball gets rolling, like the Zach Alberti information on this was Monday, so it's been almost a week now. By this time, there's usually names that are kind of being like there's usually some smoke, like you kind of get you can get some headway. I don't think any headway has been made from that at all, which is really impressive that nobody was able to crack whatever he heard. And so I love that. I always love like when I think things get kind of broken out a little bit. You got to think it kind of ruins the way that Napier and guys are trying to move around. They don't want their hand being shown too soon or too early. So the fact that nobody really has a clue of what it could be, I love it. I love that nobody knows. I hope it just drops. Something we just get a graphic and we just go berserk.
Yeah, well, part of that too is usually we can tell where Florida's heading because we'll find out who's getting interviewed, who's holding interviews and whatnot. And Florida technically can't really hold too many interviews right now because the contracts haven't expired yet. So once they make those moves with, telling guys, hey, we're going to extend your contract if you would like, or they tell a guy, hey, we thank you for your service, but we're not going to extend your contract. We wish you the best of luck. Once that news comes out, then you'll start seeing more public stuff about, for example, if they decide not to extend Billy Gonzalez, hey, here's who Florida may be targeting as the wide receivers coach. Or, hey, here's who Florida may be targeting as a potential offensive coordinator candidate. If they hire him, there's a likelihood that this offensive coordinator candidate would bring this wide receivers coach with them. There's a lot. Again, we just have to wait for the contracts for decisions to be made with that and for it to happen. And again, it shouldn't be too long. It should be in the next 2 weeks or so when all that stuff starts coming out, when decisions are finalized, because they don't want to wait all the way to the end of the contracts expiring. They want to get it done. And Billy even said they're going to wait. Billy even said we're going to wait until after the bowl game when things settle down, and then we'll start having those discussions. Well, we're exactly a week after the bowl game. The ball's going to start to get rolling after that.
Yeah, they're definitely the wheels are in motion. Christmas is over, holidays are over. Let's get back to work, boys. Not enough family time. Let's get after it. Well, Cam, I appreciate you as always, man. Again, you wrote your article. It's on your Twitter page on SI. Go check it out to get more details. Again, on these guys' contracts. There's guys that he said that we are not expiring. Go take a look at that if you're intrigued to see what Russ Callaway, DeCoster, those guys, what their contract looks like. Cam Parker 25 on X. Cam, anything else before we go?
No, it's always appreciate coming on the show. I made sure to rock my Hightop hoodie today.
Better than me.
So we're it's going to be a fun January. I think even with high school recruiting, it's not fully over. Transfer portal obviously closes, but there's still guys in the portal that Florida can make a move on who already entered. And then obviously January is the chaotic coaching carousel where sometimes you have to wait for the playoffs to end, and then you'll start seeing some moves too. So it's going to be a fun January, even when the Gators not playing football.
Well, so Cam's basically saying you'll see him very soon, boys. You'll see him very soon. He'll be back on the show to talk all news.
It's going to be a very long start to 2025 for me. I feel.
I love it. Y'all be good. Smash the like button, subscribe. Cam Parker 25 on X. Give him a follow. Go check out all of his great articles. We'll see you boys in the next one. Peace and love, baby.